the house we grew up in was a very typical house with one long kitchen room, long narrow kitchen, and it was below ground from having been swept out for years. Dirt floors get swept out for years and years. So after a while, the outside ground level was higher than the inside, and by the time we were going up, it was at least 2 steps lower in the kitchen. We had a long, nice kitchen. And that was this place where, from the time my great-grandmother woke up, she was sitting by the stove. At the far corner, there was a long, very long table. In the middle of the room. Then had a washstand against the one cupboard on the other side. Just a long. These what we call the east room. They were north room, south room, and west room. And then it was connected to the next house, to the next people's house. The rooms are always called by directions. And that whole, the whole idea of bringing the cosmos into your world happened not just in the kilos, but in the houses as well. So the walls were referred to as either the north wall, south wall, west wall. The directions being very important. And still that idea that the ceiling is still the thing that covers the whole thing. And then the earth floor. Again, that whole cosmological thing, again, at the basket of the earth coming to it. The front was the west room was where we all slept. So there was the eating room, and there was a separate door that came into the kitchen, so people just flowed out of there on a daily basis. There was always a pot of beans or something, so that anybody could walk in any time of the day and have coffee or beans and stuff. And the east room had usually 3 or 4 beds in it. And that was where people would sit or sleep. There wasn't a living room as such. And then the third room was storage, mostly storage. If there were too many people in the house, things would get moved over and people would sleep in it at all. So it was really just sleeping and eating for the house part. Sleeping and eating spaces. There's one of the houses that defined the plaza. Directly across south of the main Kiva at Santa Clara. So we had, every time we looked out the window, we saw the Kiva and the plaza. And that was off of the kitchen. And the plaza faced the kitchen, so that people were in and out of there. And what happened, it was nice because every evening people got up and walked around. And the old people would stay in the places sitting. And so this was this wonderful feeling of evening time, because it felt like the whole place came alive. People had finished eating, and they would walk around, talk to the old people who were sitting there watching everybody else move around. Children would be out playing games in the plaza, in the fields, wherever. And then after the sun started going down, people went back into their houses, and then usually stories would be told then. And different families would gather in different places. Stories would then be told. And then then that whole space came alive in a different way, because that was when you could feel all the things moving on. And I always felt that the space in the pueblo was very alive, and it especially came alive at night, because there were, not only was it when stories were told, and you could actually hear and see things, but people would go out, just out into the plaza and come back with more stories. So it was kind of nighttime was a time when all of the spirits came alive in the spaces, and there were different places where you heard distinct sounds in the village. There would be different places where different things would happen, so that those spaces would be moved. So yeah, sort of thing. You knew not to go there. She didn't want to have that experience. In that house that we grew up in, there was always a woman grinding. Had to have been a woman grinding corn, and that sound has been with the house for as long as anybody knows it was. But it comes out of that west wall area. And the sound just sort of starts coming out, and everybody hears it. You just sort of know it's there. And then every once in a while, somebody tries to find a pattern with it. Like my mother would say, seems to happen every time somebody's going to die. You can hear that sound. If something big is going to happen, you hear that sound. But it's just that sound is part of the house. It's part of the feeling in the house. Part of the house is, even though some major changes have happened in the house, it still continues to be there. The house has been continually occupied, except for a very short time after my great-grandmother died. But it goes back to her mother, to her mother, to her mother. And since it is located on the original plaza of the pueblo, and it defines the plaza space, it has to be one of the original houses. So it goes back to probably the original pueblo, when the pueblo started. And that wonderful thing of, the houses falling down and then being built back up again. That continual organicism of the structures, where they're allowed to die, where they can die, and then you get to rebuild from the same material again. There's a wonderful sense of, they were so scared of dying in this culture. And there, the thing is, even houses have to be given the respect of dying. And it's actually expected that they die. And then out of the same stuff, and a new one goes out. And it was nice because you knew that everybody else in the community was doing the same thing. That groups of extended families were also all sitting there in the evening, especially during the wintertime when the sun goes down sooner. And so you go inside to build a fire, and everybody would sit down around the fire. All sorts of things, ghost stories, old stories, just gossip about people. It was just people coming together, to talk about whatever entered their minds at the time, trying to figure out some problem, whatever it was. I think it was so incredible. Instead of us all going off and sitting there without talking, looking at television. That's one of the things that I mean that's been so incredible about growing up in that slow community. But something also happened. The space also was very conducive to that. It's amazing how what we do really is conducive or not to activities, and that those spaces get created to more to go on those kind of activities.
People really didn't have private space. They didn't have a room of their own.
Private space. There was nothing like that. There was beds in that one large room, and men and women, everybody slept in the same room. And we all, my great-grandmother used to talk about how modern we were because we had beds to sleep on. I was born in that house. My great-grandmother was a midwife, and she birthed a lot of people, and so me was born right in her hands, and ended up staying with her because my mother had so many kids, one after the other, and I ended up staying, and that's why I lived in that house. My parents and brothers and sisters lived in another house, and the house there felt totally different than my great-grandmother lived in, because it was so much so much darker. That it had a real sense of mystery about it. I mean, because of the light. The walls were still, with thick adobe, and we lived on dirt floor and a heavy vigas up on top. So there was this real entrance into a dark, warm place. And that's why the stories, I think, were especially what's the word? Then to really come to life, really, really fully partly because of the space itself. When you sat around the fire, there was, of course, no other light except that, and all the corners and the walls became just part of the night and part of the darkness. That, I think, is one of the more incredible things about those kinds of houses, is that you really experience the night and the dark time. You really experience dark that we don't anymore today. We sort of light up everything, and it's all. You don't have that. You don't allow that mystery to come into your house, into your life. But the houses really can do that. And I think that's part of why we lived in such a mythical world. Part of that was due to the space itself. And we disregard nighttime so much in this world, I think. But the nighttime was so important. Nighttime space was so critical. And just that recognition that you need at nighttime, and different things, different feelings came alive. But those houses also, sort of encouraged that the experience at the nighttime. Dreams, people were always asking, those were some of the things that were told during that story time hour, were people's dreams. What did you dream about? I dreamed about this. And would go on, and everybody would tell their dreams, and then it would become they were always listened to very carefully, because they really did feel that dreams could tell you things that you can know about or see. It was again that appreciation of the unconscious, that the appreciation of that dark side of us, I think very crucial. And that's one of the reasons why I call that world and the architecture very feminine, because it appreciates the dark, the nighttime, and all the acknowledging dreams, and acknowledging all that stuff that comes out of that mysterious, the unknown pose. Everything has a lot of ambiguity in it. The whole world like is full of just nothing is ever quite as you see it. The visual is not as important as we experience it in this world. It's too fleeting. Everything has a different quality. Everything has a shadow to it. The shadows were even quite black. The truth. But the house and the house walls, the ceilings, knowing that the directions are not just that they were named the south wall or the north wall, east wall, but that they contained the qualities, characteristics of the directions. That the north wall, of course, if you think about it, is a cold wall, because it's on the north side. Makes a lot of sense. And the east side, where the sun comes in, full of light and brightness, and the south gets a little bit too hot, and all those sorts of feelings associated with the actual physical war. And then wonderful stories that also come out about how in ceremonies and all, people can pull out different animals out of the walls. That bears can get pulled out of the north wall, and the rainbow can get pulled out of the east wall. That sort of thing. That there are actually creatures and natural forces that are part of those walls. And always the talk about the medicine bowl as being a lake, and the lake that gets that is part of the earth, part of the shore, the water that gets contained in that bowl. Also see the back to the container again. House seen as a container, and within that container is a containment of water. It's always that one containment within the other. You've got they've been really, really incredible because the I don't even know if I can call it the most critical space in the Pueblo, but certainly the beginning place of the community is the non-Sipu. And in Hopi it's called Tasipapu, but we call it non-Sipu. Non is earth, Sipu is the belly. It's like the umbilical cord. And it's that place that we came out of out of the earth. So it's our origin place. It's a place of beginnings, for the community as well, for that specific place. That is the first place when the people were moving from the north that they would identify. And that place would get identified, but it's a scooped out place in the earth, and that the dirt gets scooped out. It's usually just about so like that gets scooped. That earth gets, some sand gets put back in there, so there's a differentiation there, and then a stone will get placed on top. And that's the beginning place, and that's the first place that would get identified. And it would get identified with the help of the rainbow and the wire spider, cross communication between species. And so once that gets identified, and the spider and rainbow helps, then there's acknowledgement. Oh, this is the place to be. We can now be here. But notice, it's not a temple. It's not any positive structure. It's a marked place in the earth, but it's a very feminine space. And then it goes that the next thing that gets identified is another negative space, which is the plaza. And then finally the definers of the plaza gets put up, which are the houses, the male forms, as the very much like the mountains that define, and especially in the Southwest. I think if you look around, you talk about how geography, landscape helps to define thinking. Here in the Southwest, you can stand anywhere in the Southwest, and you can look around and see the horizon. And the horizon usually has some forms out there, mountain forms, hill forms, whatever. Buttes, whatever. And that's always, if you see the ceremonial bowls always have those mountain forms on the edge of it. It's a container within which we live. I really think the whole philosophy that developed here was so dependent, because just coming back from Hawaii, it's harder to get that sense of containment because the water is so strong. The energy, the force of the water, it's just so overwhelming sometimes. I had to run away from it at times. And then I began to think that maybe the people there were as strong and as aggressive as they are because they take that and they use it. Something else happened to us here. And the land itself really sort of makes us see something else and feel something else. And I think the energy of the Southwest is distinctive because of the land itself.
It's very mutable to me. The sort of cloud and light. What you were saying about nothing is as it appears. I can't talk a little more about that because I think that touched on something I felt, but I didn't put my finger on.
But that it comes out of that thinking that everything has to change and ruin, and that the thing that gives us our existence, gives life to the trees and the rocks, is this thing that in Taylor we call the portal of water and breath.
But that is what also assures that everything changes, and that the ever stays the same. You know, that like the water every time we go to the creek, it's changed a little bit. The sides of something else has moved in. Even the banks, the edges are all different every time we go see them. The wind continually creates motion, and that's what we're supposed to be like. You know, just to expect that's the natural. That's the natural part of our life, is movement and continual change. That's why I think that the notion of death, everything has to move and transform, and that if it stops, then you're really in trouble. Then the whole world is stopped.
But you're saying that's buildings.
Buildings, people, everything, rocks, there's the whole thing. And that's also what makes communication with trees and rocks and animals possible. Is that creative breath of the world, because the tree breathes it as much as we do, breathes as much a part of the tree as it is of us. I think that it's the way everything is done. It's not so. See, it's a very non-verbal culture, and people don't ever, aside from stories, don't ever sit down, like on those evenings and talking about. Nobody would ever sit down and lecture to you and tell you what you're supposed to be like, tell you the meaning of life. It's not that sort of thing. It's it's that you are supposed to act it, and it's through and constantly. As children, we were told to always just watch, don't talk. Just, it was always to be quiet, not to talk, but to listen, to watch, to hear it, to see it, whatnot, and then make sense of it. So when you're constantly hearing that, you've got to be a lot more observant than just, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's true.
You feel the world in a different way, and I think then that sort of. I think you learn it more that way than being told.
You learn it in different ways.
So you learn it. You learn. It's a different way of learning.
Intuitive or something.
It's not so verbal. It's always about creation. There's that wonderful thing about, again, back to the breath of the universe, which makes me. If I breathe, every time I take a breath, I'm breathing in creation itself, and I become a creator. I become part of creation. I am the creator. Mm-hmm. And that notion is so strong, I think, in those communities, because that. Well, one obvious thing is museums and all full of artifacts of the Southwest. And the people moved around quite a lot. They didn't stay very long in one place. But in that moving around, they didn't have to take everything with them. So they left behind incredible amounts of stuff. Wherever they were, and make it all they had to take with them was that capability to create again. Yeah, to be able to just, to know that, we go over there, the whole thing will happen again. We can create again. A real belief in the capability of creation. About how women and children being very, very much a part, and actually the primary form givers, form creators in that world, where the men and the boys would bring the materials, young men, and then the women and children would put it up and create the space as they needed it. Some of us need it. It's difficult, but it is. Everything goes with everything else. If you create it, you also give yourself to it in a way in each probably appreciate it and can be a part of it in a way. And that whole idea of whenever anybody works on a place and you sweat on it, you breathe on it, then you have become a part of the place.
So when you decided to build this house, was it the first house you had built?
Oh no, we built one in the trees over there. That built home. Why we built this one, and we built the one in between here. And helped on a couple others. When Ralph and I, we bought a small little place that was much too big for the three. It was much too small for the three children and ourselves, and it was a kitchen and an extra room. That was about all. And we wanted to build some bedrooms on. And Ralph was very nervous about it. But we just started doing it and did it, and that was even before we had any architectural experience or schooling or anything like that. So just you need something, you do it. And the thing that I feel really good about, I think makes me feel better than anything, is that the children, my daughters, do the same thing. Roxanne just built this 2-story house, and most of it by herself. She went through a couple of husbands in the process, but for the most part, she.
Well, we all understand that.
But for the most
I think
part,
I'd envy building a house, but
for the most part, she just.
They got work done.
Right, she kept going. Right. It's so typical of her, and in the meantime, she comes out with all these figures and creatures and builds a house and has kids and takes care of her kids at the same time, takes care of the men that come through her life, and she just keeps going.
What's it coming from?
I think it's just that incredible life force in women.
I think you have to take some credit, which is that she watched you do it.
But then I watched my mother do it. I watched my great grandmother do it. I watched my aunts do it. It is. I see anthropologists, archaeologists haven't picked up on what, and I am the one saying it, and I was in this incredible meeting with a bunch of Pueblo men at the beginning of the Surviving Columbus film. They were all Pueblo men around the table, and I finally just started pushing them because it was even more male than it is now, but it was just horrible at the beginning, and I had to keep saying, "You're missing that point. You're missing the women through the whole story. You're missing the incredible energy of the women." And then I began to say it even stronger, And I finally just stopped and says, "Please tell me, do you think I'm wrong in what I'm saying? That it is a very female culture." And they all looked at each other, and this was Alfonso Ortiz and Joe Sando, and Rex kind of did, all the brains of the Pueblo world. They all looked at each other, and there was nothing that they could say about it. But it's, I think, something that, because men have been writing about it, and most of the anthropologists, archaeologists have come in have been men. A few women, but they didn't catch it either because they're coming from. But is that it is in one way, a very strong, and it comes strong female culture, but it comes through especially strongly in that connecting with the earth and the houses being built of the earth, the pots being made out of the earth. That whole strong connection to the earth, and earth being the mother figure and the ultimate symbol of mother. I think the men also in that world used to have stronger ties than they do today, because they would farm today and go on the hunting together. There would be life activities that they would do instead of today going out to the gas station or to the supermarket out here. One of the things that I get struck by, and dislike the whole activity when I stop and think about it, the feast days, because the feast days really were I think really generated by Catholicism. And you celebrate St. Clair's Feast. Our day is St. Clair's Day, and then the saints come out and all that sort of stuff. But the feast days, what happens is really quite remarkable, because we get together days ahead, make the bread, go through all everything that it takes to feed 400 or 500 people. But a few years ago, when we were making bread at my mother's house, there were about, 5, 6 women. And we were all standing there forming the dough. And as we stand around the table and sort of laughing and talking, children are running around, and the men come in and out. But it's a core of women sort of do all these activities. And as we were standing there forming the dough, somebody asked one of the older women where she learned how she had a peculiar way of knitting the dough and then forming it. Where'd you learn how to do that? And everybody had been watching, and we were all aware of her doing. She happened not to be a relative, but a neighbor that was with us that day. And she says, she sort of looked up and like, that's a funny question. And she says, of course I'll watch my mother do it. And that was so amazing, because there was again that idea that you just watch other people and you learn how to do it. That's all there is. What's so hard about it? And it's that whole notion, the same way people learn how to make pottery. So you watch and you do it, and it's just expected. Look at the incredible number of internationally famous potters out of Santa Clara lately. Not just national and international, every world-known potters, I find, and really excellent at it. Why? Because they just, why did Roxanne just sort of sit there and, because she felt she could do it. It's somehow that confidence that sort of comes through that thinking, all you have to do is, if you watch very careful, you can do it. I don't know, maybe, do you think maybe it's because in this world we don't make very many things. Most people don't make very many things. And that's actually the real creation, I don't know. With the hands especially. And I think there's something, we still have hands, The hands are an incredible thing that I think we forget about, except to hold a pencil. The confidence is an incredible confidence that right now, especially the Pueblo women have, that confidence is so, but I think it was always there. It was always just there because they always had a support system around them that always reinforced them, and it was always back. I mean, the struggles, the fights, the jealousies, the tensions that go on, but what you know for sure without any doubt is that they are there. And they're there, whether you mad at you or not, they're there. And doesn't matter what, but the funny thing is that it won't, usually in interpersonal things, there will be some conflict, or when it gets time to help you do something, it's some hand and people. And that support, I think, is meaningful, and that gives an incredible confidence, incredible sense of confidence. And also the not being afraid to make a mistake. And that's part of that whole, again, back to that idea that everything changes. And you have to be able to move on that. This way, and everybody's going to accept it, that everybody's going to make a mistake. Mistakes are all just part of whatever happens. And it doesn't have to be something that limits your activity or limits anything you do or think. Right. Because of course there will be mistakes. Right. And then the problem is not how you, like in pottery designing, not how you try and erase it and get rid of the mistake, but how you work it into what you do next. How you incorporate the whatever mess you made, so then there's nothing to be scared of. If that's all you have to do, you do the same thing with your own. And we actually did this a number of times here. I was telling you, you refused to really draw up and made a tissue paper, but I sketched something on. And then from there, we had put up some arches back then in that run, and we took them down, and did something else. Up where the bedroom is, we had put part of the room up over the roof. And we went way out in the field to look at how it looked from the outside, and we all agreed it looked horrible. So we came back and tore it all down again and did something else. So, just being able to, it's okay. It actually didn't take that much time and effort. But then we all felt better again. It was one of the nicest moments of building this house was when we saw the upstairs addition we were trying to put on it, and saw that it just wasn't fitting, and we all stood there looking at each other, feeling a little bit embarrassed for doing it. And then we all looked at each other with this wonderful smile. We all agree it doesn't look good. Isn't that great? The other thing of mine is Christianity, and the idea that we can get to heaven. The notion of a heaven is identical with perfection. And if that's what we're striving for, then we've already lost. That we can't ever accept the idea that we live in this world of flux, that we live in. But see, along with that also comes the idea that there's an absolute truth somewhere, that somewhere it's written that this is the way it's supposed to be, rather than that. God, that's not the way the world works at all. I mean, it's just never. And the Pueblo just very strongly goes to the relational relativeness of the world. That everything is dependent on the relationship that exists. Mm-hmm. That truth is this in one context, but if you change the characters and you change the configuration, it also becomes different. Then the story changes again. So that continuous change and transformation of life is all in part of it. Mm-hmm. And that there's never, where is it? Where does truth lie? I don't know. But then putting that onto houses and the construction of houses. We get standards, all the building codes, and that's part of that whole thinking that there is somebody who knows how it should be for everybody. I have an incredible idea. I think it's insane that it should be like that even. Again, looking outside of yourself for somebody to tell you it's okay. Like with the insurance company, finding my security out there instead of inside of myself, or each inside of themselves. I've never brought myself to insure my house because I feel that I can't give myself to somebody else like that and have somebody else assure me that my life is going to be constant and the same forever and ever. And that's the kind of security insurance companies tell me that we have. I think, for one thing, I think it's ridiculous, and I don't want to think that way. I want to know that if a fire burns my house down, I have the capability to create it again, recreate it, redo it, whatever it requires to do. But it also means that I'm not dependent on an insurance company, but I'm dependent on people who I have to live with all the time. So that, again, it's back to relationships again. I had no relationships with an insurance agent. But I do with my brother, I do with my uncle, my sisters, my children. If we're still alive, we've got the capability to go through it and do it. I just don't, I don't know. What do we need? What do we really need? We need food. And if we've gone so far away from being able to find our food and environment that we live in, then I think we don't deserve to be alive. And if we can't find our shelter, which is a necessity, then good grief, there are too many people in the world anyway, then maybe most of us should be wiped out. If we can't figure out how to put some sort of shelter over ourselves. Human beings have been doing that for a lot longer than having insurance. Companies assuring anything about their lives. Never could be homeless in a world. Never could be homeless in that kind of thing. If you hold on to that kind of thinking, you can't ever be human.
Oh my.
Because you know your environment so well, then. Because you are one with the place that you live in. And I guess what I'm saying is that human beings really need to know plants. I'm talking about that relationship with the natural world. And what you do in a city where it's not there for the most part. But that I couldn't live in a city and where I can't live in a city. And so my mentality goes back to what Amoko was saying. It's in rural, and I think it's a rural philosophy. And also not to see ourselves as such precious things in the world. And not having any sense of the whole. And when we get over precious about ourselves, that we can't do anything. We can't do anything. We don't see ourselves in the wind blowing on the water. And then what do we do? Our time, our energy is limited. What do we choose to give ourselves to, our time to, and our understanding to? So children get shipped off to school every single day, and that's where their whole life is. And they're thinking about making school 12 months a year, Oh, what about family relationships? What happens to the family? What happens to the community? What happens to all those life survival skills that I think are so crucial? I don't know what happens. What's going on? We're going to be a bunch of people who won't know how to do anything.
I think it's already that.
And that all we can do is talk about something, but not be able to do anything. And that's the whole thing about the Pueblo is you don't plan it, you don't think about it, you don't sit around and say I'm going to do it. You just do it. People will wake up in the morning and they won't have ever said anything about it. They'll wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to build a house. It's going to be over here, and then he'll start mixing the mud, and then people will come by and help. But that thing about, again, school and planning and all of this, the verbalness, the intellectualization of the whole thing, I think is part of the male-dominated living. Because I think for the most part, that I'm talking like a Pueblo woman. I think for the most part, men are basically very lazy. I think that's why women rebel. You should put this on there. You have to edit it all. But you told me I could see it.
Yeah, so.
But you have to. You have to edit somewhere. But it's so separate, it's just, and it would be, okay, the women would get out, we're going to do this. And then it's a matter of getting the males involved in it.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the way we built that addition this summer. It was, okay, Ralph, we're going to do this today, and we're going to start right here. Oh, why? That was the hardest thing in the world to get into. And their bodies are so you know, Ralph is so big, he's so strong. It's so amazing how he can do so much more than I can when he gets going, because he's so strong. But the inertia is just as great. That's like see, that's a big difference. It's really much harder to work with materials that are standardized. And it's already somewhat predetermined for you what you can do and what you can make. But when you're working with something as malleable as Adobe, you cut the Adobe in half, you can make it smaller, you can do practically anything, right? And again, back to, you know, that very malleable feminine substance.
That's right.
Where you can mold it, do whatever you want with it. It's recognized there has to be a ceremony first. You have to ask if it's an appropriate place to go. So permission has to be asked of the whole thing from the universe, as it were. and then the offerings put in the footings, if that's what you're doing, depending on what you're doing. And then as the walls go up, things get put in the walls. Things also get put where they move and the walls join. And then very often you see things in the rafters, and you know, it's at different points, and it may be. And the interesting thing is that there's nothing very prescribed about it. It may be at a moment when something happens in the building process that has to be done. It may be when your uncle comes by and says, "Have you put something over here?" Maybe then he will. And it's got that flexibility of. But then what's recognized is that periodically they also have to get healed, because houses can get sick. Houses can have bad wind. You know, they can. Something can happen inside of them, or lightning may come in through the window. You know, we've got very severe lightning storms. Lightning come in and mess up the energy of the house, and then the house has to get healed. And the medicine men come in, and they'll have a ceremony and heal. But the incredible thing is that once a year, the entire community forms, the entire village, not just the people, but the structures, the space, the small passageways, everything gets healed. Mm-hmm. Because the whole unit is seen as an alive, organic being.
Part of your family.
It's not just the house you live in that is considered alive and breathing and all of that, but the whole form is the whole place. It's the same thing as a pot. It's like creating a pot. It's your creation. It's a creation. I'm a creation. Mm-hmm. The pot's creation. I have breath. The pot has breath. The house has breath. And we all get messed up, off and on. You have to take care of everything. You take care of yourself. Once in a while, feed yourself. And you also have to feed the house. You also have to touch it and make sure that it's all okay. And that whole process, and that's why I wanted the hand plastering for such a long time was a big part of it. Besides bringing the whole group back together again. The whole thing is constantly talking about how to take care of things. It's a world in which you're supposed to take care of everything. Everybody's supposed to be taking care of you. Mm-hmm. That's why, again, feminine here is a concept. That was a woman inside the house taking care of everything and everything. Her house, they called it. Yeah. And they were also the primary maintainers too. It was all plaster. They and the children again plaster. And we're talking about that process, not of house building, not just starting when you put in your footing, or when you lay down the first block, or that starts holding, that if you take it into that mythical world, it starts when the people are looking for a place, the place finding thing, and then finding the center of the universe. And it's always looking for this, it's always looking for the center. It's always centering yourself in your world. It's a continual centering process. And if your thoughts aren't right and if your actions aren't right, then nothing comes out right either. And so it's, in real modern terms, a real centering that has to continuously happen. And that's what the healing is about too, and this is coming back to the sound. And there's a wonderful term that we have, and what we're looking for in the space and what we're looking for in life are the same thing. And that term is kiwowatsiktuanche, which means we are seeking life. Everything is seeking life. Whether you're building a house or whether you're making a pot, whether you're feeding people, it's all seeking life. And seeking life is when you feel that you have come into one with everything learned. Where it's all sort of gone like,
Sounds Eastern too.
it's very Eastern. And we even have the duality, the yin and yang stuff. Our whole community's winter and summer, and how those things come together to make up the whole. It's very Eastern, very Taoist too. Like the best thing to do is sort of let the breath flow through me and let it happen as it will. It means that in the Pueblo, in the Tewa, just the Tewa Pueblos, other Pueblos have different organization ways of doing it. But we have the summer people and the winter people. And at equinox, the one whole group gets leadership. It used to be more traditionally so than it is today, because now we have a council and a tribal and a governor and a tribal council, and it's since the 30s even. Everybody talks about this tribal council, tribal council, that, governor, that. And really new recent stuff, But the old system was here, this group of summer people, group of winter people, and they all had to live together. And they're opposites, but they had to come like men and women have to come together. It's a whole new opposite. The sky and the earth have to come together. And all this light and dark, and the whole thing, all the opposites have to come together. But how do you make up the year in human existence? You have the winter and you have summer time, and in winter time the winter people give everything over to the summer people, and then in the next 6 months, then they give it back over again. So it's a continual back and forth thing. And they were the ones that made decisions about when the seeds were going to get put in, when the water was going to get brought in, when the dancers were going to come out, when the hunters were going to go dingo, when all the decisions would be made about the community. But it was that back and forth being. And again, then we get to that notion there can never be a hierarchical political system. There can never be one person that really takes it on. Because it's really, as a group, it's not the winter chief that gives it over to the summer chief. It's the winter people that give it over to the summer people. And so that it assures out a real balance. And nobody ever gets any real control and power. What the metaphors are so sexual in that world. And the architecture is also, that opening I'm talking about. And just a female opening into the... It's literally a female opening into the female earth. Mm-hmm. And then, and the mountains because of their form and all being talked about as being male. And the sky is, the sky is male too, because all the rain comes from it. and how the spurring, the wine comes down and fertilizes the earth. It's very sexual, the whole thing is. And then you get, those wonderful ladders. You have the kivas, and then out of the opening at the top, you get this wonderful wooden poles that stick out. They don't have to be so, if you think about it, there's no practical reason for it, because the ladder could just come out of the hole and then get cut off. But no, they extend. As high as they can, as long a poles as they can find, that come right out of the womb, the kiva. And you've got this pole that comes right into the womb, into the opening. Very, and then you've got the incredible thing in Taos. I don't know if you've ever seen that, the pole climbing. In Taos, what you've got is in the plaza space, in that concave space, the very female containing space, they put up a pole right in the middle of the plaza. And it's so blatant there. So blatant, because what they do is they take this great big bags of food, meat, melons, whatever, like great big bags of things, and they take two Noahs or more, and they hang them, right there. It's so blatant. It's absolutely blatant. And so you get this the two testicles hanging there, full of light, full of and the poles that going right into the plaza. And so their thinking is that the whole thinking that architecture, way of building, is so straightforward. There's no, and I always talk about how there's such a lack of decoration. Not a lot of time spent on carving out things and putting things on the houses. It's usually very straightforward. Most of the openings into the houses, into the kiva during pre-contact time, were to the roof. We first had to climb the ladder up onto the roof, and then go in. And for most of the kiva structures today, you still have that. You still have to go. If they're not underground and had to go up a few steps, there'll be a ladder. If they're above ground, you still have to have a ladder to go up and come down the other. And the people actually talk about it as going back into the mother. So it's a literal, in this rule, it's going up to heaven and going to the Father. There, it's the most, when you want to be in contact, when you want to have the spiritual interaction, you go into the kiva, into the mother. And that going into the opening, from the top down, is always that. But very interesting, as the Spanish came in, and they said, that made, of course, no sense to them. Ridiculous to go up and come back down again. There's the wall. Put a door into it and go straight in. But I also think it was more than that, because I think as the Pueblo people began to really take on more that the other thinking, the door goes straight into the wall. But I think it always follows some thinking there. The windows, as in general, just start getting bigger also, so that like this house, there's some dark areas, but for the most part, it's a very light house, and a lot of light coming in. And then we don't have to spend as much time outside. See, there was a real reason for having very dark interiors, because it was outside, and those plaza spaces are wonderful spaces to live in.